Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another week of our Monday Motivation Spotlight. I'm Lesley Kaplan, same time, same place, every single Monday. Thank you to all of you who join live. That way you also get to share your details in the chat, what you do regarding your business, if you're a business owner. And if you're watching the recording, welcome as well. We enjoy that you watch our show every single Monday. As you know, the series is also co-sponsored by ACI. Thank you to ACI. And thank you to our co-sponsor too for the month, Kim Bash, Israel's real estate matchmaker. So we have a superb lineup for you today. Every Monday, we have a superb lineup. I know I say that every single week. And truly, our guests are amazing every single week. And some of you are sitting here who you have been guests too. So I'm going to spotlight somebody who I've been following for many, many years, the one and only Barbara Sofer. I've been reading, she reminded me today that she's been writing for the Jerusalem Post for around 20 years. So it could be that I've been following her articles without realizing that it's been for 20 years. Let me introduce the very special Barbara Sofer, who needs no introduction to many of you, but I will totally introduce her. She comes with a great resume. Barbara, as many of you know, is the Israel Director of Public Relations for Hadassah Women's Zionist Organization. She has been in Israel for 50 years, which is a wow. I think more than all of us in the forum, probably more than most of us that are going to be watching this even via the recording. In addition to her being a journalist writing for the Jerusalem Post and other places, her byline has appeared in the New York Times, Women's Day, Reader's Digest, Boston Globe, and many other places. She's a prize-winning journalist. She lives in Jerusalem. She's been an Emmy winner on CNBC, and I could go on and on and on and say many of the other amazing things. And she's an author. She's written 6 books and contributed to others. So, Barbara, I'm sure you've got tons of information to share with us. And I'm talking behind the scenes now before we even connected. You know, you really are special. I just like, your energy is just unbelievable. So take it away. Please share with us who is the Barbara Sofer behind the scenes, maybe your Aliyah days and when you started off in Israel, the Israel from then to today, Hadassah, how you got involved, and of course, all your inspiring stories of which we read every week in the Post. Thank you, Barbara. Good morning, and we're so delighted to have you here.
Good morning from Jerusalem, those persons who will be listening from abroad. Isn't it an honor, a privilege to be living in Jerusalem, to be living in Israel? For so many generations, the grandparents and great-grandparents and always, couldn't even dream that we have this wonderful experience that we have. And I feel privileged every single day to wake up in Jerusalem, to wake up in Israel. It's still, I have to pinch myself that we're able to do this. And that's sort of my philosophy of life. So how did I get here? I was, the great barons of the world, Baron Hirsch and Baron Rothschild, divided their influence. And Baron Hirsch thought that Jews would make great farmers in the United States. So they set up Jews in farming communities in the United States. And when my grandfather came over in the early 1900s, running away, he was reported because he threw a Polish policeman over the fence and had to get away quickly. He got very sick working in New York, and the doctor said to him, you need to go to a health farm. Of course, they didn't have, 2 nickels to rub together. And so I said, a health farm, go to a real farm. And we had cousins on a real farm in Colchester, Connecticut. So that's indeed how we went there. He never became a farmer, but he indeed, I did grow up in Colchester, Connecticut, which had a Jewish community. Of course, 2 synagogues, one across the street from the other. They rarely would cross the street to make up the minyan, but that's where I grew up. And in Colchester was indeed a small New England town, and we were very involved in the New England town side of it, of course. And what I was also involved, though, in Young Judea. And on a weekend where we had borrowed I had actually borrowed the cabin from the volunteer fire department on the Salmon River so that we could have a Shabbaton and discuss Zionism. And my the shaliach came from Israel. Of course, he was really impressed that we had this river and we had this cabin. And they actually asked, we had a station wagon. He actually asked if he could sleep in the station wagon because they had seen them in movies and people were sleeping in them. In any case, the following day, we were walking along the gorgeous Salmon River, taking a Shabbat Tiyul. And he turned to me and said, Barbara, what are your plans for next year? I was a senior in high school. I said, I don't know. I haven't received my acceptances yet from the colleges, but I'm sure I'll be active in Zionist organizations. And he looked at me and he said, I thought you were serious. Serious. I was spending my weekends again discussing Zionism, Chada Am and Theodore Herzl. And he said, of course, no one ever uses that word in English. You know, in Hebrew, you say "atrichinit." So he said to me, "You're not really serious," and it's so insulting. Well, later in that walk, I had what I really call like an epiphany. I had been to Israel on a Young Judea youth tour, come back, didn't think it had much impression on me, though I'd had a great time. I saw myself walking in a Navdat near Sde Boker. Okay, and I said, hey, that's really crazy. And I mean, I don't want to do this. This is so inconvenient to move to Israel. But I couldn't find a good reason not to do it. My parents were well off enough to come occasionally to visit me in Israel, not like the grandparents' generation where they never saw their families again. My family was already in the United States before the Shoah, so we hadn't directly gone through the Shoah, nor were we third-class citizens in an Arab country. So there was really no excuse for doing it. The following week, I got my college acceptances, and I decided to go to the University of Pennsylvania because they had a flexible junior year abroad program, and I could try out this vision of mine. So I got there, junior year abroad, and we were supposed to be staying in Shikunei Aleph at the Hebrew University, but guess what? The building wasn't ready yet. So they shipped us somewhere. It was night. I woke up in the morning, and where was I? In Sde Boker. Now I saw that decide that this vision had somehow come true. And I think that set me on the path to see all of these connections that till every single day, I see the connections and something very, very special going on here. And that's behind, I think, the things that I write and the things that I experience and how I experience. I see a lot of, these days, I see a lot of wounded soldiers. Someone asked me, doesn't this get you down? I said, down? To be exposed to these amazing heroes who we thought about this generation that they were, cell phones, screens, what were they? We, the baby boomers, we had gone through all these different things. No, they had this incredible, the Israeli ones at least, had the incredible heroism. And seeing them every day, I'm more and more inspired. So I live in Jerusalem. I have the Shayubri, my 5 children and 20 grandchildren. And I'm married to Gerald Schroeder, who is the expert on science and Bible. And I try to balance writing and doing my job as the director of public relations for Hadassah. We're now deeply involved in a campaign called End the Silence, which is trying to get people not to forget the horrific attacks on women in particular on the 7th of October, and that we assume are still going on to our poor hostages. So that's who I am. What else?
What else? Wow, you've got so much more to share with us. That's who you are in a nutshell, but you are very much an Israeli icon, known, across the board in so many places. I think you've disappeared. I think Barbara has left our screen. We're going to have to readmit her. Okay, interesting. In the almost 4 months that we've done this is only the second time that this has happened, that the speaker has lost connection. I think she must have actually clicked on or pushed on a button. So why don't we involve you guys and you ladies in the meantime until Barbara rejoins us? Which of you, and I'm sure many of you, have met Barbara personally and would like to share a story about you and with Barbara? I know, Toby, you've met Barbara before. Sharon, you've met Barbara before. Would any of you like to share it? Anything that you like about your experience with Barbara? Something about Israel, something that's going on right now? You're allowed to unmute yourselves. Yeah, where is Toby? She's disappeared too. Oh, she's here. Here we go. Okay, I see you writing.
I wrote it in
Yes,
the
I can see. Here we go. Let's have a look.
Barbara is my go-to person if we ever need any kind of doctor search, whatever. She is the first phone call I make, and she is the one who will always direct us to the right person in Hadassah. That's number one. And number two, she comes to all our shows and she writes wonderful articles about us. And she's just a wonderful, amazing person. So that's what I have to say about Barbara.
Right. Okay, good. Here we go. She's coming back in now. I was actually about to call her. All right. Let's see where Barbara is. Can you see Barbara on your screen? Okay, yeah. Barbara, we lost you. Here we go. Firstly, unmute yourself. Barbara, you're muted again. I'm going to spotlight you. All right, you're muted. Barbara, you just need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, trying. 1 second.
Yes, we were talking about you behind the scenes, and I was about to pause the recording, and just now I'm going to give Barbara a call because you've left the meeting. All right, good.
Okay, can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
We can hear you.
In the middle, I said that's it, and my screen went dead. I don't know. I'm a little worried.
I wasn't sure if you did that deliberately, that you said that's it, it disconnected when we go through till 9:30.
So I can tell you that at the very beginning, I was indeed this idealistic new immigrant, and I was living in an apartment, of course, without a stove. And everybody I knew was terrific bakers. So I invited a lot of people over, and I called a friend in Haifa to ask her, for my favorite cake in the world. And, in those days, we didn't have any phones, let alone cell phones. So you had to go to, I don't know if anyone here is long enough to remember the days in which we had to use tokens of simonim to make a phone call. Now, an out-of-town phone call was long distance. So you had to come with your bag of tokens, and somehow there was no reason of it. They'd go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I don't know if anyone here remembers that there were a lot of phone booths, but not one in the country had glass in it that had sustained any kind of enthusiasm or vandalism. So there I was taking down the recipe, and I thought I got it. And I went to the store and I bought all my ingredients, and of course, we didn't have an oven, so you had to make it in something that we call a wonder pot, sir pelle. Anyone here on the call remember that the sir pelle? I see a hand going up over there, and you had to cook it. Of course, I'd never baked a cake in my life, but what could be so complicated? So I went over my list, and I got to not so much flour and sugar and coconut, just the things that I love, and the sugar. Well, I wrote down 8 cups of sugar. Now, of course, I was in Ola Hadassah and I couldn't hear that well. And I wrote down Shmona Kosot, 8 cups. That's what she said. So I wasn't an experienced enough baker to know, that something was a little wrong with that. I mean, just to show you how inexperienced and naive I was. So I kept pouring in, you had one bag of sugar, then another bag of sugar, right? Of course, she had said shmona kapot, 8 tablespoons, and not 8 cups. Well,
you know what, Barbara, it's better than what I once did. Was I thought the salt was the sugar, and I added like 2 cups of salt into it. And I was making it for somebody. So luckily I tasted it first and I had to throw out the whole lot.
Well, what happened, was cooking and cooking. It didn't seem to come together very well. And it was kind of hard to serve. I think I needed a painting tool, what we call schmachtel, instead of any kind of a serving. And I finally got some, and I remember the guest sitting there, and I gave the first guest, and how is it? And
And then you realized your mistake.
And said, "Oh, it's very good, but a little sweet." And I think that's also a story that talks about how I look at my life in Israel. That not everything comes out exactly as you planned it, but it's pretty sweet. And when I look at my life here, and I look back I'm very much connected both with my high school. With the high school I graduated from, which was a regular high school, an American Connecticut small town high school, and with the alumni of the University of Pennsylvania, who've been very much in the news now. I look at my life and I look at their lives, and I'm very pleased that I can say that I have lived my adult life here as part of the Jewish people in the state of Israel. And I think that's something we talk about resilience today, and we talk about inspiration, and sometimes we have to look at that. And we have a lot of tough things here, but I believe that they don't break us, they build our resilience. Otherwise, we couldn't be here, and we couldn't be living in this situation where we really don't know what's today, what's tomorrow. We turn on the news in the morning, and we're not sure. And we have to see all of this as part of our experience in building that resilience. And I also see myself as playing, some kind of a role in it. I was recruited by a headhunter, actually, to work for Hadassah, and I was working as a freelance writer, doing very nicely, and writing for many. Could support myself for writing for American publications, and I said, I didn't know, should I do it? Shouldn't I do it? And I talked to my accountant. He said, freelancing isn't good in the long run. You need to have a job because you have to accumulate a pension and your pension and so on and so forth. So I committed for a year. And
so when was this? How long after you made Aliyah? Because you've been in Israel around 50 years.
Yeah. So
how long was this after you made Aliyah?
That was in, I agreed in 2019. I started in 2020, which is, of course, the beginning of the Intifada.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the Intifada started, I realized that they needed me because working for Hadassah, the Women's Zionist Organization of America, still owns those Hadassah hospitals. Hadassah set up medicine in this country. This is the work of women, you remember. This is the women, while the men were talking politics, the women said, we cannot have a modern state. Those are our grandmothers or great-grandmothers who said, we cannot have a modern state without having a health system. They hadn't read Maslow. They didn't know the philosophy, but they didn't need to. They knew that was true. And they followed Henrietta Zoll, who came as early as 1909 and saw the children with the flies in their eyes. And, there was a 50% over life death rate for women giving birth. And it couldn't be like that. And the hospitals that were open were mostly missionary hospitals. The Baron Rothschild had tried a hospital, but he failed. And the women decided we have to have health service. So they started with two nurses whom they sent over from America, and they dealt with the children with the flies in their eyes and opened Tipat Chalav, which was, of course, a revolutionary kind of way of treating well babies. They had to start with the children in a way because people were very suspicious. The missionary hospitals just pretty much wanted to convert them as they treated them. And even so, these American-speaking women, they weren't 100% sure. So the first the nurses came in. Hadassah was started in 1912, and the two nurses came in 1913, and by 1918 they'd opened a nursing school, revolutionary in pre-state Israel, the first post-high school for girls. In 1918, that's a date. People say it's a familiar sound. It's the time of the last pandemic, of course. So the two came together. It was fortuitous timing. By 1939, Hadassah was able to open an amazing hospital on Mount Scopus. And Mount Scopus was, people came from all over, a Western hospital. Now, let me ask you, The money came from the United States, but where did the doctors and the nurses and the technicians come from? Many of them were running away from Hitler. Think about the timing. That one day you were the head of the department in the finest hospital in Europe. The European hospitals were the best. One day you were a department head professor, and the next day you were running for your life. You could have gone maybe to the United States, but after all, although they weren't all religious or Zionist, they did kick you out because you were a Jew. Well, where would you go? What was your option? You're a famous ophthalmologist. Would you want to drain the swamps? It's idealistic, but we had those kids with the flies in their eyes. We needed an ophthalmologist. So the timing of the opening of Mount Scopus and the ability to absorb Europe's best doctors, and others came from other countries too, from the United States too, but that mass of brilliance that came to Jerusalem was like exceptional timing for our grandmothers. They did that. There's no way you can say it. They were volunteers. They raised the money. How did they do it? Cake sales. Oh, isn't that sweet? We have a cake sale, again, with their cake sales and with the thrift shops. If you remember, growing up in America, there was always the Hadassah thrift shop. My late friend June Walker, the national president of Hadassah, always told the story of how it came her brother's bar mitzvah, and their father had one suit in the Bronx, and he went closet to closet. He couldn't find the suit until the mother admitted that she had sold it at a Hadassah thrift shop sale. She said, "You could cope without a suit and shawl. The kinder in Jerusalem needed the money more than we did," and that was the philosophy. So they were able to do that. This is, women, the power of women to do it. It wouldn't have happened with all these volunteer women. Now I feel the same way now, because here we are with so many, between 3,000 and 4,000 wounded soldiers. All of us listen the first thing in the morning, Mutar lefarsem, the name of the soldiers who were killed. And then we hear that some soldiers, a lot of soldiers, were injured, many of them seriously injured. And we're heartbroken over those who were killed. And we're heartbroken every single minute over the hostages. What about the wounded? They're seriously wounded. And now, thank God, at the beginning of January, we opened this huge rehab center in Jerusalem. Again, timing. The halls filled with wounded soldiers, each one a hero, every story. They're absolutely amazing. And they deserve to have the very best. And it's such a pleasure to be able to see them in these beautiful rooms with anti-gravity machines and excellent care, and they deserve it. We need to provide it. And I feel this is a continuation of the commitment of hundreds of thousands of women who have said we have to have and I'm very proud to be part of it. So I started to say that when I joined for a year, became the Intifada, and we're somehow getting smashed in public relations, even though, we're getting blown up in bombs. And you needed someone to tell those stories. I mean, yesterday I ran into a woman, says to me, "Don't you recognize me?" This beautiful woman in the early 70s. She says, "My name is Michal Dadash." And I, of course, when she said that she looked so stunning. And I remembered when she was she and her family on that Hanukkah of the early Intifada flew to an Israeli resort in Africa, and Al-Qaeda followed them there, and she was blown up and terribly blown up. And here she was, for something aesthetic coming into Hadassah, and I really see myself as part of that commitment and the work of women who know when a project is worthy. Let's face it. Last week, we read the Golden Calf. We read about the Golden Calf. The women then said, "We don't take part in such a project. That's not for us." When it came to something good, women ran, and we still run to help and do and everything. And that's why I feel a kind of continuum with my life, and it's very important for me to tell those stories.
Right, absolutely. And you tell many of these stories in your articles that we read every single week in the Jerusalem Post.
Well, it comes back, though, to that kind of click that I had, even when I landed in, and I woke up and I was in stable care. Because when you live here, you feel there's something else happening. It's not a usual country. It's not, we complain about all kinds of things, but there is a spirit and a heavenly connection here. And the dots come together in so many different ways. And it's a test of our faith. It's always a test of our faith because it's hard. And, we have to build our own resilience. And we have to, also think about taking care of ourselves, not only as caregivers, but as people who need care as well. And I think that's something that as we approach International Women's Day and anything that celebrates women, that we need to take a moment and internalize that feeling that we have to have. I just have one final story that once I'm active in the Shira Hadassah community. That's egalitarian Orthodox, and we do home hospitality. And one Friday night, we had this huge table, and everybody introduced themselves. And one woman said she had a lot of piercings, and I was surprised that she said her name was Penina. She said that she had been to she was studying she's getting a PhD in philosophy at a famous British university, and she was studying the nature of questions. Okay, but for herself, she said, "So why'd you come here to Israel?" She said, "I wanted a little spirituality." So I said, "So did you find it?" She says, "Well, I went to the Kotel. It's not my thing really to pray, but when you're in Rome, when you're in Jerusalem, do as the Jerusalemites do, pray." And she said, I got to the, there were so many books. You remember, it used to be kind of a balagan there with all the books. And she said, I pulled out a book and I said to myself, God, if this is something that really speaks to me, speak to me, give me a sign. And she opened up the book and it said in it, "To Penina with love."
Wow.
Now she turned to our table. She turned to our table and she said, "And what do you make of that?" So I ask us all, ladies, what do we make of it? And which book is our name written? So we're still in that journey to find that book. And that's what we're trying to do. So thank you for having me. I'm sorry about the blackout.
No problem. The minutes that you were here, which was the majority, was well worth the time of the blackout. And I'm so happy that I invited you. And I didn't mention this in the beginning, but I did mention it in all the advertising leading up to the event, that when I was thinking about who could be the person to invite for the week of International Women's Day, which is this coming Friday on March 8th, I thought Barbara. Nobody better than Barbara could fill those shoes. So Barbara, you certainly did fill those shoes. And I invite everyone, if you're not already reading all Barbara's books and her articles and also in the Jerusalem Post, to, read it. And certainly she inspires me every single week, where she just finds new stories all the time. Just for 30 seconds, 1 minute, Barbara of the future, how do you see yourself in the years to come?
Well,
your journey is taking you.
Well, I have some, I'm still very, very busy with recording what's happening, and I'm at Mount Scopus a lot to hear those stories. But, I'm still in the midst of a big book project that I hope, please God, to finish by the summer. It's a sequel to a novel that I wrote many years ago. The characters are a little older, not as much as I am older than when I wrote it, but but they've aged a bit, and that's where I really do see myself. I'm still able to do my job, but maybe sometime in the future I'll only want to be here by my computer writing. So, and bringing up my grandchildren.
Amazing. And I love it. And I've always said this for many, many years now, is that it doesn't matter how old you are, but, or how young, how old you are, but, we still have goals and meanings, and you just don't seem to be slowing down. So that is just amazing.
You're probably guessing my age, but I'm please God, on Pesach, I'm turning, Erev Pesach, I'm turning 75. And I think I was born then because the doctor wanted to go away from Pesach and induce me. So maybe I'm a little younger. Maybe I'm really a little younger than that. So
great, amazing. Well, Barbara, thank you so much for being our guest today on Monday Motivation Spotlight. You've been a superb guest, as I anticipated that you would be. Next week, we have also a wonderful guest who many of you know, Rivka Lambert-Adler, who was a previous neighbor, a friend of mine, and she's also very well known in the journalist field, and I'll give a full introduction to her next week. So have a safe week to Am Yisrael. As I say, this program was started because of the war. We will continue even after the war, whenever that will be. But we're wishing Am Yisrael a safe and prosperous time, wishing our hostages a safe return, and a refuah shlema, as you mentioned, to the Chayalim, and safe return. And thank you to ACI, our co-sponsor, and to Kim Bash, our co-sponsor for the month as well. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
This recording will be available.
Not to worry, we're going to win this one. So
yeah, absolutely. If you want to rewatch this recording, it's available on YouTube and Spotify later today. And I invite you to subscribe to the channel too, so that you don't miss out on an episode. Thank you for joining. I'm Israel Chai. Thank you again, Barbara, and see you next week. Monday Motivation.
Israel Chai.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.